All right, we're back. We're doing some more CodingBat today. Looking at the string 2, we're almost done with this thing. And it's getting pretty challenging. In fact, this XYZ middle, which we're about to do right now, is the hardest one in string 2, maybe. Let's take a look at it. Given a string, does XYZ appear in the middle of the string? That seems easy. To define the middle, we'll say that the number of chars to the left and right of XYZ must differ by at most 1. This problem is harder than it looks. Okay. This problem would be somewhat easy if only one occurrence of XYZ could happen. We're going to see in the test cases that they give us test cases where XYZ happens multiple times. Why is that a problem? Well, my first thought when looking at this is, well, let's use index of to find the XYZ that occurs in the middle, and then we'll just kind of move based on that. But when you put multiple occurrences of XYZ in the string, then that throws off index of because we're going to find the first occurrence. And even last index of, which I've kind of accidentally shown you, last index of won't help you either if there's multiple occurrences, because there could be, 3 occurrences. So index of would get you the one towards the beginning, last index of would get you the one towards the end, but you want the one in the middle. So the only way to get truly in the middle is to actually start at the middle and kind of work your way out. I'm going to create this integer. Let's zoom in a little bit. I'm going to create this integer called mid, and it is going to be the mid index. Right, we'll take our string length, we'll divide by 2. Now, if it's even, if it's odd, that can kind of throw things off a bit. Ultimately, here's what I did. I'm going to say while str.charat mid does not equal x. So the idea is I'm going to find my midpoint. It is possible that that lands on an X, I believe. It's possible that it lands on a Z. It's, in a lot of cases, it's going to land on the Y that's in the middle, provided that XYZ is even there. So no matter what character I land on, because it could be, in the middle, plus or minus, right? This is just like dead center. So this is pretty easy, but it could be shifted this way. Now imagine there's an extra character here and not one here, then it's shifted the other way. So what I'm going to do is just start in literally the center of the string. And then I'm going to basically just keep subtracting 1 off my mid until I find the X character. Okay. Now we'll talk about it in just a moment. It's possible that XYZ is not even in the string at all, which would cause problems here. But I'm going to kind of start in the middle, and then I'm going to work backwards until I find X. So this says while the current character is not equal to X, subtract 1 on my index. This would happen, and then I would check that one. I'm asking, is that not an X? Is that not an X? So we're going to keep decrementing mid until we find the X. Okay. Now I basically want to see, is this even XYZ? I've landed on an X. Is it even XYZ, right? The current location of mid in theory is an X. It is possible that there is no XYZ, we're out of bounds, and we'll handle that in just a moment. But I need to actually check, do I have XYZ? I'm on an X, but is it XYZ? To kind of make this simple, I'm going to say mid 3. I'm going to create this string, and we're going to get basically, I'm going to take my mid and get a substring of 3 characters. So we're going to go into str, getting a substring. That substring is going to be mid, comma, mid plus 3. Keep in mind that my mid index should be the X, right? So if we kind of let's use an example. Right here I have this string. It has a length of 7. I'm going to find the midpoint by doing str.length divided by 2. That's going to be 3.5, which, keep in mind, we have integer division here, so it will then truncate to just 3. So we're going to start at index 3, 0, 1, 2, 3. So mid is here initially. And I'm going to say while that character is not an X, subtract 1 on the mid. Okay, we're now here. While that character is not an X. Well, it is an X. So this will be false. We would stop. We're now here. We're then going to take a substring beginning at this index plus 3. So I'll get these 3 characters. Now what I'm interested in is, are those 3 characters XYZ? Right? Is mid 3, the string, equal to XYZ. I mean, if it's not, then we don't even care, right? If it is XYZ, I need to get the characters in front. I need to get the characters behind. Before we continue, why don't we look at this little bit of code with a slightly different string, like this guy right here. This string has a length of 6, right? So I'm going to do 6 divided by 2. That's also going to be a 3. 0, 1, 2, 3. Okay, so here's where we're at. You can kind of see why just doing like a +1, like a -1 and a +1 trying to get your 3-character substring can be a problem here, because there is XYZ, and this is going to ultimately be a true case. Ultimately, they say that the difference of the characters in front and behind can have a difference of 1 at most. Okay, so if I'm here, this is my midpoint. I'm going to say while the current character is not an X. Well, it's not. So I'm going to do mid minus minus. We're here. We're going to say while this character is not an X. It's not. So do mid minus minus. We're here. While this character is not an X, it is. So we're going to stop there. I'm going to get the 3 characters starting at this index. Now I'm curious to know, is it XYZ? If it's XYZ, I am next interested in how many characters are in front of it, how many characters are behind it. So let's get that. I'm going to create this string called bag, which is all the characters in the beginning up to our current index. Keep in mind this whole time that mid is here. Right? We did all this fancy math. Mid is on the X. I want to get everything from the very beginning of my string up to mid. In this example, it's only 1 character, but it can be a lot. Right? In this example, it's actually 2. So we're going to get a substring beginning at index 0 up to my mid. I'm going to get my end, which should be everything after the XYZ. Right? The only reference I really have here is still mid. So based on mid, I want to jump to this part. So if mid has a value of 1, I need to get to index 4. We're going to do a substring beginning at mid plus 3. Right? If this is my location, I want to basically hop the length of mid to get to here. So bag should be everything in front of my XYZ. End should be everything behind it. Why do I care? Well, using substring, I could then get the lengths of these things. I need to know, is the length of bag, is the difference between the length of bag less than or equal to the length of do the lengths of these differ by 1 or less? That's what I want to know. Here in this case, bag is shorter than end, but it is possible it's the other way around. It's possible that bag is actually longer than end. So that kind of hints at like an if statement, right? You got to check to see which is longer, blah, 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 blah. But it's easier than that because we actually know math.absolute value, right? So I can take the absolute value of the difference. I'm going to do bag.length minus end.length. So we're going to find the absolute value of the difference between our beginning and end. The only reason why we're doing absolute value is because this means I don't care. I don't care which is longer. As long as our absolute value difference is 1 or less. Okay? So I want to know, this is going to give me some type of value, and I want to know, is that value less than or equal to 1? Okay? Notice that we actually have a Boolean operation here, and ultimately we need to return a Boolean, so I can actually do this at a point of return. So let's look at our logic so far. We're going to find the midpoint. We'll say that, we'll use this one again as our example. That's going to land us here. We're going to say, while that character is not an X, we're going to backtrack. That's going to put us here. So this is my midpoint going into this string. I'm going to take a substring of the 3 characters there. I'm going to ask, is that equal to XYZ? In this example, that's true. So we're going to enter the body where we're going to get a substring from 0 up to mid. Keep in mind, inclusive, exclusive. I'm going to get my end substring. It's going to be mid plus 3. I'm using the overloaded version of substring, so we're going to start at this point and go through the rest of the string. So that should be everything that happens after my XYZ. Okay, so I'm then going to take the length of bag, which is 2. I'm going to take the length of end, which is 2. We're going to subtract those. I'm going to get the absolute value, right? I get 0. We'll get the absolute value of 0, which is 0. I'm going to ask, is 0 less than or equal to 1 true or false? True or false? Is 0 less than or equal to 1? That's true. So we're going to return true because the bag had the same length as the other one. Right? If I use this one, I'm going to step through my code again using this test case. We're going to find our midpoint. That is, let's see, this has a length of 7. I'm going to do 7 divided by 2. That's 3.5. It'll truncate to 3. So we're looking at index 3, 0, 1, 2, 3. That's this right here. I'm going to ask, is the current character not equal to x? That's true. It's a z. It's not an x. So I'm going to subtract 1 off my mid, putting us here. We'll ask, is this character not an x? It's not an x, so I'll subtract 1 off. We're here. I'm going to ask, is this one not an x? It is an x. So we're not going to do this. We're going to continue on. My mid is currently at this x. We're going to do a substring beginning at that point plus 3. That's going to give us these 3 characters. I'm going to ask, are those 3 characters equal to XYZ? They are. Okay. I'm now interested, is the stuff that comes before it have a length that is very similar to the end stuff? Okay, so we grab bag, that should just be a capital A. We grab end, that should be this triple B's. We're going to ask, is bag.length, that's 1, minus end.length, that's 3. Right, we're going to subtract here, we get a negative 2. We'll do the absolute value of that, giving us just a positive 2. We'll ask, is 2 less than or equal to 1? That's false. Right, this is going to give me a false value that I return. Even though we had XYZ, the lengths of bag and end was not small enough. Okay, so if I am at this point, what it means is we found our x, we got the middle 3, but it wasn't an XYZ. So I'm going to return false. There's going to be just a few problems, but we are so close. Here's our problems, right? We'll fix those real fast, and then I'll show you why index of doesn't exactly work. I had a problem whenever there's nothing there. I had a problem when it's a length of 1. I got a problem when it's a length of 2, but we got like x's, okay? So for this one, right, I'm going to do this when the string is nothing, right? Whenever we say XYZ, let's leave this as a comment, XYZ middle passing in nothing, the string length is 0. Not a problem. I'm going to divide by 2. Also not a problem. I'm going to get 0. That means that mid has a value of 0. I'm trying to get the character at index 0. There is no index 0. That's out of bounds. Okay. So when it's an x, our length is 1. I'm going to do 1 divided by 2. That's 0.5, which will truncate to 0. I'm trying to get the character at index 0. Okay, there is an index 0 in this case. I'm asking, is it not equal to x? It is an x, so we won't do this. I enter this part right here. We're going to do 0 plus 3 right here, and that's going to push us out of bounds for our substring. Okay, if it's an xy, that's a problem as well. So you see, if our string length is less than 3, we're going to have a problem. Notice that when it's exactly 3, we're fine, right? Okay, easiest way to handle this, very first thing I'm going to do in my method here is I'm just going to check if str.length is less than 3. I'm not even going to bother. We're going to return false. We'll stop right there. Very first thing I'm going to do is ask, do I even have 3 characters? If I don't, there's no point in even doing anything else. Okay, here is our solution. Okay, there's lots of cases down in here. You can see why index of is not going to work. If I do index of on this string, it's going to give me this one right here. We're not even close to the center, right? If I do last index of, it's going to give me this one here. We're not even close to the center. So that's the problem with index of. If you were guaranteed to have at most one occurrence of XYZ, you'd be golden. You can use index of, and this thing would be a piece of cake. But instead, if there's not even 3 characters, we peace out. Otherwise, we find the midpoint. We backtrack until we find an X. We then cut a 3-character substring at that point. We check to see, is that 3-character substring XYZ? If it is, I get all the stuff before it. I get all the stuff after it. I then find the difference in the lengths between those 2 strings. If it's less than or equal to 1, then yeah, we meet our criteria. Otherwise, no. Even though I had XYZ, the difference here, the lengths here, was too much. If I hit this false statement, what it means is that I went through all of this, but my middle 3 was not XYZ anyway. This is XYZ middle, and it's easily the hardest one out of the string 2 section. Let's check out the next one. Get sandwich. A sandwich is 2 pieces of bread with something in between. Return the string that is between the first and last appearance of bread in the given string, or return the empty string if there is not 2 pieces of bread. Easy peasy. This one's easy because we know last index of, kind of. I snuck it into a video, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to find the first occurrence of bread. We can do that with index of. Right? I'm going to create int 1. And that is an index, right? Because ultimately I need to know where it's at. There's some filler that can occur before or after. And ultimately what we're looking for is bread. And then we're getting the thing that's in between. Okay, so in order to ignore the filler, I'm going to use index of, which is going to just basically breeze right through the first part of the string until it finds bread. Okay, so if I use index of and I look for bread, in this particular example, I'm going to get this index, index 2. That is where bread first occurs. Okay, so I find the first bread. I'm going to look for the second bread using last index of. I snuck this in a previous video. It is just like index of. The literal only difference is that we start our search from this way. We're going to kind of loop backwards until we find bread. Okay, so again, using this one as an example, 1 is going to be this index, which is index 2. I don't know why I just did this, because I got to now count this. Last index of bread is going to be this index, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. That's index 10, which is index 10. Okay, so now what I want to do is get this. I need to get the stuff in between bread. Well, that's going to be a substring for sure. But where do I start? I have this value and this value, right? I have those 2 indexes. I need to start here. That is going to be in relation to this occurrence of bread, this index plus 5, the length of bread. Okay, that index is 1. Plus 5 should hop us to this part right here. So that is my beginning index. Where do I stop? That one's much easier. It's right here. Because this is going to be exclusive in my substring call, I can just plug it in. Well, this seems easy, right? Ooh. Looks good, looks good. Oh, here's a problem. There's only 1 occurrence of bread. Okay. Here, there's no bread. Here's there's no bread. So how do we handle this? First of all, let's think about this one. If there's only 1 occurrence of bread, right? If I do index of, we're going to start from the beginning, and we'll find this index. If I do last index of, we're going to start from the end, but we would end up on the exact same index. Okay? So what's one way I can tell that there are multiple occurrences of bread? If these things are not the same. If 1 does not equal 2, what that means is I have found multiple occurrences. It's actually even better than that. Take a look at this one. If I look for bread, I'm going to get, using index of, I'm going to get a -1. If I look for bread using last index of, I'm also going to get a -1. So what this means is this will also handle the case where there's no occurrences of bread. So this helps me out if there's only one occurrence. This helps me out if there are no occurrences of bread. Okay, we're going to have some issue here, right? It says missing return statement now. What's the problem? Well, the only time I'm returning something is if I have at least 2 occurrences of bread. If I have 1 or less occurrences, we're going to return an empty string. And there you have it. So something of note is that basically they're always looking for the outer occurrences of bread. Like XYZ middle gave us a huge problem because it only wanted the one in the center. But because they want the exterior occurrences, index of and last index of are perfect. Here we have a bread sandwich. Okay, I'm going to get rid of my comments, give you one last look, and we're going to move on to the next one. Same star char. Return true if for every star in the string there are chars both immediately before and after the star, they are the same. Wording here is a little rough. Okay, so here we got a star. The character before it's a Y. The character after it's a Y. So that's a true. Here we have a star. The character before it is a Y. The character after it's a Z. So that's a false. Here, note that we can have multiple occurrences. Okay, I'm going to focus on this one real fast because the character before it's an A, the character after it's an A. Notice that we still ultimately get a true even with multiple occurrences. So when there's a star at the beginning and you can presume the end, that's automatically going to be okay. All right, so here's what we're going to do. We're going to loop through the string looking for occurrences of star, right? With each iteration, I'm going to ask, is the current character a star? Is the current character a star? The moment that I find a star, I'm going to check the characters before and after it to see if they are the same. So we're going to loop through our string. I'm going to start off with our standard loop, and I would consider, changing it after the fact. This may be an issue. I'm going to ask, is the current character a star? How do I know? Well, str char at I is equal to a star. Notice that I'm using char at, and I am using an equals relational operator to compare it to another character, right? I'm comparing character to character using the equals relational operator. You can do that with primitive data types. If the current character is a star, I want to know about the character before and after it. You could use an and. I've talked about in a previous video how nested if statements is actually identical to using an and logical operator. So I've found a star. I want to know, does the character before it equal the character after it? Of note, you could use substring in order to get these characters just one character at a time, but it will be a string, which means you would need to use the equals method in order to make that comparison. So if you're using substring here, make sure you're using the equals method. When it's only a single character, I really like char at because I think the syntax is a lot cleaner. So if I find a star, I'm going to ask, is the character before it the same as the character after it? More importantly, right, because there could be multiple occurrences, I actually don't want to know if they're equal, because I ultimately need to check all occurrences. Realities are we can invert this. So the moment that we find an occurrence where they are not equal, we can stop searching. So I'm just going to change that to a not, right? We're going to loop through. I'm going to ask, is the current character a star? If it's a star, I'm going to ask, is the character before it not equal to the character after it? If those characters are not equal, we can return false. And believe it or not, we can get rid of the braces here. There is one statement inside of my for loop, an if statement. There's one statement inside of my if statement, an if statement. There's one statement inside of that if statement, a return statement. However, I do need to return something after the loop. If I manage to go through the entire string and we never find characters that differ on either side of the stars, we can return true. We can assume that they must be the same, or there's no stars, or something like that. Okay. So I'm getting an index out of bounds. Right? This worked here. This worked here. That looks good. So we have some pretty good cases. Let's look at our index out of bounds. Right? I'm specifically getting a -1. Take a look. Right? I would ask, I'm going to loop through this string. I would ask, is the current character a star? Okay. The very first thing I'm going to try to do is get the character before it, which is giving us our -1. So that's a problem. Realities are, I don't care about the first character. I don't care if it's a star. So I'm actually going to start my search at index 1. Likewise, when we reach the end, we don't care about what's after it. So that means I want to stop one character early. Keep in mind that I would, in theory, still get an index out of bounds on the end, the tail end of it. If I'm at the last character and I do a +1, that's going to send me out of bounds. I'm going to run this bad boy. And you see, just by nature of the problem, I don't care about the stars. They're actually at the first and last character. Let's do one more. Given a string, compute a new string by moving the first char to come after the next two. So the chars ABC yields BCA. We're going to take this first character and bump it to the end. Repeat this process for each subsequent group of 3 chars. Okay, so ABCDEF yields BCA. We are taking this A and moving it here. And then we're going to take this D and we're going to move it here. Ignore any group of fewer than 3 chars at the end. When I first saw this, I thought this was going to make it difficult. This actually makes it easier. I thought that if there were excess characters, you would have to tack those on. But this is saying ignore those. Right? If there's excess characters, don't even bother with it. Okay. I ultimately like this one because it asks you to do something we don't normally do, and that is kind of change how the loop iterates. Let me show you. We're ultimately going to have to return some type of string. Right? Keep in mind that I can't really modify an existing string, right? We can't delete characters from a string. We don't technically add characters to a string. What we constantly do is make new strings. Even when I do like the little += shorthand assignment operator, I'm not technically adding to the string. I'm constantly creating new strings and then saving that in. Okay, so I'm going to create this empty string, and we're going to add characters to it. Right? And so simply put, we're going to loop through str. We'll use this guy as an example. And what I'm going to do is essentially add CA to my return string, then the T to my return string. I'm going to add DO to my return string, then G to my return string. All right? I'm going to use a loop. So something of note, if you did want to add the remaining characters, like if our problem did ask us to add any excess characters at the end, so imagine, so this has exactly 6, but imagine we had 8. What that would mean is that we would have 2 excess characters. If we were asked to add those excess characters, I would suggest a while loop here because I would want to know, where did I stop? With our for loop, we don't have access to our counter variable after the loop. But because we don't care about any excess characters, we can just use a for loop here. All right, so I'm going to say while, I is less than str.length, I++. Let's start with kind of our standard loop. Okay. I'm going to again use this guy as an example. So right now, I is here. First thing I want to do is grab these 2 characters and add them to my return string. So I need to base that on I. RTN plus equals a substring from str. Starting at this index, that is, keep in mind, again, I is here. You know what? Let's bust out the notepad. All right, here's my string. I is here. I need this substring. Okay, that's going to be I plus 1, right? This is I plus 1. I need it up to this index, right? Because keep in mind it's inclusive, exclusive. So what is this index in relation to I? That's I plus 3. Okay, if you take a quick look at this, the difference in these parameters is 2. So I'm getting 2 characters starting at I plus 1. Should be those 2 characters. We'll get that substring. We'll add it to RTN. Keep in mind that using the shorthand assignment operator, we're saying RTN is going to be, what it is plus this substring. Okay. So what I want to do now, because at this point, my string is CA using this example. What I want to do now is add the T. Okay, I'm going to do a separate line here, but you could do it all in the same line. Because it's a single character, I'm going to use char@. I didn't move, right? I is still here. I got this CA, I added it to my return string. I now need to get this character that's at index I. We'll add that. Okay. So that's what my return string is so far. What I want to do now is basically, notice that str hasn't changed. Why don't we even indicate that this is str and that I is here. I want to jump from index 0 to here. I just processed all of these characters. I want to go from here to here. So what controls my movement of I? It's going to be this. Instead of just incrementing by 1, which will put us here, I don't need that. Like I've already processed C, right? I don't need that. I need to go all the way to here. Okay, if this is index 0, this is index 3, so we need to jump by 3. Instead of incrementing by 1, I'm going to say I is equal to I plus 3. Hopefully, you quickly see this is something we can turn into a shorthand assignment operator. I'm going to say I plus equals 3. So I just processed this, right? RTN now has a value of CAT. I'm going to increment I by 3, putting it here. And then we're going to repeat the same thing. I'm going to get these 2 characters, add that to my return string, right? I'm going to get the character at index I, add that to my return string. After this is over, I'm going to return it. Okay. Let's see. Why are we getting an index out of bounds? So this says string index out of bounds. We tried to access line 12. We tried to access index 12 on line 7. If I take a look, there's 3, there's 3, there's 3. That is what they expected. Okay. So here's the initial string. We process those 3, we process those 3, process those 3. I got an extra 1 here. So the problem is, kind of when I'm at the end here, I went out of bounds. But ultimately, they don't care. They don't want the excess characters. I just need to stop a little bit early. We've actually encountered this a lot. I'm ultimately kind of playing with a 3-character substring. So I want to stop 2 earlier. Our condition ultimately controls when we stop. And so I'm just going to subtract 2 off that. We see we have it all right, so I'm going to take out our comments. I'm going to reduce this to 1 line to show you that that does indeed work. And one of the benefits is, whenever we reduce it to 1 line, is we can get rid of these braces. So just check to make sure it still works. I can do this. Check to make sure it still works again. And so I ultimately like this one because we've done this problem a lot. This is the only thing that's really changing. This is what's new. This is what's different. Okay. I believe that's 4 problems, and I believe we're going to stop there. I'll see you in the next one.